In this myth-busting session, I want to discuss what 0.1% asbestos content actually means in the contents of asbestos-containing soils. So what does 0.1% asbestos mean? To visualize it, 0.1, as a weight, we could use the example of 1 gram of asbestos in 1 kilogram of soil. This could be in the form of loose asbestos fibre, that is virtually pure fibre, not in its original form, and therefore not necessarily recognizable as an ACM. Or it could be a mixture of an ACM or fibre that has either been degraded through weathering or disaggregation and possibly broken into smaller pieces, but still primarily recognizable as an ACM. In the laboratory, we will remove these pieces. You need a UCAS accreditation for this analysis, referred to as qualitative analysis. And then the extracted fibres and or ACMs are weighed to provide a quantitative analysis result. The method for this analysis is contained in the SCA, that is the Standing Committee of Analysts, the Blue Book method for the analysis of asbestos in soils. This method provides a table of typical asbestos content in ACMs, which we can use in the laboratory to establish the asbestos content within an identifiable ACM. The certificate of analysis should provide a breakdown of the amount of loose fibre and types of ACM in the soil. Once this information is available, an assessment can be made in conjunction with other information about the waste soil by a specialist to consign that waste, and a waste code is assigned. .1% asbestos content in soil is therefore used for the classification of waste soil. It should not be referred to as safe or unsafe. It is only used for classifying for waste for disposal, normally to landfill. In the Environment Agency document, Technical Guidance WM3, waste codes for the classification of waste, including soils and construction and demolition material containing soil, can be found. It states that asbestos in soil or C&D material of 0.1% or above asbestos content will be classified as hazardous waste. It doesn't differentiate between bonded asbestos or friable asbestos. And another point to note is that at any load of containing visible ACM, the entire load will be deemed to contain greater than 0.1% asbestos content. This is because it's based on the original form of the ACM, i.e. in the SCA table, for instance, AIB contains 40% asbestos content and asbestos cement 50% content. So you can see how easily it can be over 0.1%. It is therefore important to understand whether there is loose asbestos fibre or an original identifiable form of ACM in the soil. The UCAS accredited testing laboratory will be able to separate out what percentage loose fibre and ACMs are present, and this is particularly useful if there's planned remediation, therefore treatment of the waste on site to reduce the cost to landfill, or if designated for reuse on site. This is particularly popular as reducing the requirement for landfill makes economic sense and environmental sense too. If soil contains less than 0.1% asbestos, it is therefore not classified as hazardous waste for disposal, but non-hazardous waste, and is therefore cheaper. The gate price, the landfill tax, is a couple of pounds compared to £90 per tonne for off-site disposal, so it is very relevant. So is it safe? If 0.1 and above asbestos content is deemed hazardous waste for disposal, then soil containing less than 0.1% is deemed non-hazardous. But remember, this term refers only to waste classification, not whether it's safe to use on site or not. So what is a safe level of asbestos in soil? Well, as you can imagine, if this was easy, we'd all be asbestos in soils experts. The obvious answer is there is no safe level. In fact, no de minimis. In the Syria guidance, Asbestos in Soil and Made Ground, A Guide to Understanding and Managing Risks, Syria C733, published back in 2014, it states, "It is important to note that the hazardous waste threshold only applies to the classification of waste and is hazard-based. It is not a level below which risks are acceptable, and so is not an appropriate generic assessment criterion for remediation target for asbestos-containing soils." Information is therefore key. A great deal of information will be obtained from the Phase 1 report for the site, and extensive site investigation will determine if there are any hotspots, what type of asbestos and how much. And the laboratory analysis sitting alongside that should detail the types of asbestos found, how much and the overall quantity. It is worth noting, though, in the laboratory, the analytical method, of course, we're extracting fibres from the soil, from processing, and we're weighing that asbestos. We are limited therefore by the sensitivity of our balances in the laboratory, and most labs will be able to report to 0.001%. Therefore, a result below that limit of detection of less than 0.001% on a certificate shouldn't be misinterpreted that there's no asbestos present. It simply means we found it, but we couldn't weigh it because our balances weren't sensitive enough, and that's often misconstrued. With the test information, we can interpret the results and develop that risk assessment for handling the soil to protect worker health and ensure that asbestos kept on site does create a legacy for future use, i.e., are you going to have no-dig gardens, putting soil under hard standings, for instance? And this could all some kind of asbestos register for the future, and this subject is still being explored. To recap, 0% asbestos in soils is not safe or unsafe. It is purely for classification purposes only.